So currently I'm on holidays, and I realise people with jobs, that means working a lot more, but annoyingly I haven't gotten a job yet. I want one. This video probably will cover a reason why. I've been quite bored. Apart from assignments, which I've done a few of, there's not too much to do when you're an only child. But, of course, there is the internet, which is always helpful. You're on it right now, so either you're bludging from an assignment or you're relaxing. Good on you for either of those things. I've gotten into Spider Man recently, and that guy, Stan Lee, and I realised I probably should know a bit more about Spidey in terms of comics and history, so I did. And I looked up, and of course there's the 700 issues of Amazing Spider Man and the Superior Spider Man as well. There's so much to read, so I started. And the problem is, I found myself comparing this, oh, I could have planned this better. And I found myself comparing this to this, which you can't see because the brightness is lost. And I find myself comparing this to this. Amazing Fantasy number 15. I've read a lot of these, I've read the recent ones, and so I decided to go backwards in time and read the originals, starting with the Amazing Fantasies. I read the other ones as well, but I didn't find them too interesting. It's quite interesting that Spider-Man started as one of these sort of one-off superheroes, but gained enough following and enjoyability from the audience that he in turn became, well, what he is now, into his own series. And so I've been reading those. I've got them all on my iPad. Well, I've got the first 200. Once I've read the first 200, I shall move on. And so what I'm planning is to do sort of semi-update videos as I'm reading, to sort of tell you how I'm feeling about the issues. So I wanted to say, within the first 10 issues, we get introduced to pretty much all the main baddies of Spider-Man. When I say all of them, I don't really mean all of them. I've looked ahead the next couple of issues. Pretty much the main 10 or 11 baddies get thrown in early on. Spoilers if you are planning on doing this, but I'm not actually telling you much about the story details, just more or less just the overall consensus, but it's pretty much the origins of these villains and stuff, which you would have seen in the movies, although slightly warped to suit modernness. The first two issues were sort of a mixed bag, because we had like two stories in one for the first two issues. And the first issue was just about Spider-Man coping with being this superhero, and J. Jonah Jameson being all like, "What are you doing, Spider-Man? You're a bad person." Straight off, issue 1, The Chameleon. Something that hasn't really been referenced or talked about in the new, well, there's two sets of movies that have come out for the Spider-Man, and I personally didn't realise that he was the first villain that Spidey faced. But that was quite strange, really. That in modern culture, Chameleon isn't well known, but he is technically like the first villain Spidey faces that has become well known as such. Issue 2 we had the Vulture, another one that's strange because the first two villains have never appeared in a movie as of yet. There's Vulture wings in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but not the Vulture himself. And then finally issue 3 had Doc Ock, so we got thrown with one of the Spider-Man's biggest villains to date. In terms of comic, he's quite large in terms of Spidey's story. Then we had Sandman, they threw in Doctor Doom, who isn't a Spidey baddie, he got established in Fantastic Four's universe, and then Electro and the Lizard got thrown in before issue 10. So it's come full circle? No, sort of, yeah. The main thing is, within the first 10 issues, we get introduced to these massive characters that are all throughout Spidey's history. It shows you all the way back when they first started. They had, well, Stan and everyone who worked on the issues had really big ideas. In saying that, comic books aren't like these yet. They're nothing. Reading these early issues, they're quite slow. Reading these might take 10-15 minutes. I think these take about an hour, half an hour at the minimum. You get hit with pages and pages of dialogue. The image show what they're doing, but back then this was such a new concept. I've been discussing with my friend Josh, who you've seen in a couple of videos. that comic books hadn't really been established in a way that they knew how to write to be direct. The images show what's happening, but you've got boxes and dialogue and thinking bubbles that just tell you everything that's happening in the scene, and your mind can comprehend it. Maybe back then they didn't, but it's just quite strange how they've progressed and how now the images sort of tell the story and what they say is simplified. Just sort of like how a movie, you don't have a background narration going on, you've got to have good images. And so it shows that back then the stories were still there, but they were just a lot more in your face compared to now the stories are in the images. I've said that a couple of times, but it's quite interesting how the comics have come. It is slowly developing a sort of style that the images are in depth and they show you enough, and the dialogue and the narration is slowly heating off, which is good because it makes it a bit quicker to read, and it's a little bit more enjoyable because the first couple of issues, as cool as they were, felt a bit like a novel. It's quite interesting. Gwen Stacy, there's no Mary Jane, there's no nothing that the movies have given us in terms of love interests. You've got Betty Brant, who works at the Daily Bugle, which isn't really the Daily Bugle, it's more called Now, is the magazine that Jonah Jameson works on, which is interesting, but the Daily Bugle does exist within the guy, JJJ, Barker, you're fired, that guy. But yeah, it's quite interesting how the movies have chosen. I feel like they didn't pick too much from the original, from how it is right now, from the original sort of issues, but I'm going to keep reading, and it's quite interesting. So if you want to join me on the journey, do so. Don't post any spoilers down below. Check the title of the video. If it's 10 issues, you can talk about the first 10 issues. If it's the first 50 issues, talk about them, but don't go forward. I'm going to try and hold off on the spoilers, but yes. So yeah, if you've read the issues, great, do it, because, you know, it's good not to be alone reading 700 issues of an old comic book, but good. So join me if you want. I'll be on Twitter. I'll probably be talking about it a lot. But thanks for watching. Thwip. No. It doesn't actually say thwip. It's just interesting. There's not too much action noises. Like the Batman comics, it's like BAM! And it doesn't happen. But anyway, yeah. Laters.